even if you have a great relationship, it's going to take work. You are going to have to work on communication. You are going to have triggers come up. You are going to have these patterns that show up. And it's just to understand that that's not enough of a reason necessarily to go, oh, we can't work together, or, this is not something we should do. If you really have an interest or a curiosity, any business partnership is like that, just like any relationship or marriage is it does take conscious effort and work to make it work over time.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to The Way of the Muse, a podcast for women who want to create richness in every area of their lives, from business and career to lifestyle, relationships, family, purpose, and fulfillment. I'm Gigi Sage.
And I'm McKenna Sage. We're a mother-daughter coaching team, and combined, we've spent over 4 decades helping people create their best and most fully expressed lives. If you're ready to step into your bigger dreams with ease, fun, and flow, you're in the right place. Let's get into the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode about mothers and daughters.
Yeah, that's what we are. We're mother and daughter.
In case you were wondering, or in case you're new to the podcast. And I am going to birth a daughter here any time now. So maybe even already here by the time we're airing this episode.
Yeah,
so
I think so. So it's perfect timing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We get a lot of questions, I guess, about this topic, and people who are curious about our relationship because we've worked together now full time, I think, for about 7 years, and
wow.
And always done projects together, and just had this relationship where we kind of navigate through, I would say, different types of relationships, right? Friendship, mother-daughter, business. And so I think looking in from the outside, people are often wondering, how does that work? It doesn't really work. And, do you guys fight? And how do you move through some of those things? So that's a lot of what we're going to kind of peel back the curtain and share with you today. And this can be whether you just want to improve your relationship with your mother or your daughter, or maybe, like some people, you're curious about doing some kind of project together or business together at some point. So hopefully a little bit of what we share today, you can take some piece and apply that for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is such a great topic because I think it's such a sacred relationship. And I think when people can't work it out to where they have a good relationship with a mother-daughter situation, it's such a loss in many ways, just because when you can work it out, it's such a strengthening relationship. And even though, like you said, McKenna, we still fight, but we know how to fight, right? And we practiced. And, if we can share a few things with you today, so where you feel that, maybe I think a lot of times people don't have the tools or they don't know how to navigate the relationship. And most relationships, right? Relationships when we are the closest to people are the most rewarding and sometimes the most challenging. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, starting out again, we work together. And so a lot of the questions we get are kind of around that. Like, how do you navigate being a mother-daughter, having that personal relationship, but also having a professional relationship over so many years? So there's a couple distinctions we want to make here. Gigi, do you want to start us off with how do we make that work?
Yeah. Well, one way is that what I always say is you've got to get professional instead of personal. And that, is really to treat each other. If you're going to work together, it needs to be when we step through that door, we're not mother and daughter. We are two professionals walking into our business, and we're here to support and grow our business together. And we have to really set aside anything personal, because the minute you put personal into it, you go that downward spiral. You take something personally, it triggers something in your childhood, or it triggers something with your mother in her childhood or whatever. And then you just go down this terrible hole, and it's really hard to get up from there. And so we really work on this, and we also share this with our clients all the time. That's the first step, especially if you're going to work with family. And it's true in any business. I recommend people do this. You get super, if you're working with your friends or whatever, you use this thing of, when we step into any kind of project we're doing and what we're doing in our business, we're pros. We're pros, and we set everything else aside. And that's how we do it. I mean, that it's simple in many ways, and it's also very challenging in other ways, but we've had a lot of practice doing it.
Yeah. I mean, really, this is something you can use even if you're not in business together. Of course, there are times where you want to have your personal relationship and be more in that dynamic. But I would say a lot of conflict, a lot of things can be cleared up if you're willing to sometimes just set those things aside. And, professional, that's how we describe it. It's like, is not taking things personally, getting professional. But it's just kind of that thing of, like you're saying, trying to think if there's another way to describe that so people could kind of understand what we mean.
Isn't it respect? I mean, it's being respectful, right? It's like going into a situation and being super respectful. You're in there to, we're building something together. We're doing something together. We can either, be emotional and disrespectful, or we can just turn on our skills of being super respectful and make sure that we constantly practice that.
Yeah, I think the other thing, we're going to talk about this more as we go through today, is not being familiar, like thinking you know everything about that person or they are some certain way. There's a lot more we'll say about that, but that's another aspect of professionalism, is kind of setting all that aside and just being in the moment with each other around, like you said, what is it we're moving forward, or just enjoying each other's company, and kind of setting the opinions, the judgments, the habitual ways of interacting with each other, setting those aside for a little while. So that's number one for us, is we call it, getting professional, not taking things personally. And then the second one we want to talk about is not holding a view. So that really kind of dovetails into what I was just sharing, which is a view. And I think we have a whole podcast episode on this, actually. So we'll link to that in the show notes. It's a really, really, really powerful concept in your relationships. But a view is kind of like when we think this person is this way. We think my mom is like this, or my daughter is like this. And we assume we know who that person is, and it becomes like this fixed, I don't know another word other than view. Yeah, it becomes this fixed view of somebody. And what we always talk about is that when you do that, it doesn't allow the other person to change or evolve or to surprise you, right?
Yeah.
What do you want to share?
When we had this early on, remember when we started working together, and I showed you this in terms of, because the minute you would have a view, because before, I think that sometimes you did, right?
Of course.
And the minute
I'm sure I still do sometimes.
The minute you did, then it would stop, first of all our creativity. It would stop the evolution of how we evolved with each other. And it really took us to a place of, it's like stuck energy, kind of. It really makes things fixed in a way. And it's the shift of that is each day being curious about, who is this person and who is this a person evolving into, and not taking the past and bringing it into the present. Of course, there's things that we know about each other, and there's ways that I have my bad ways that I am, and the annoying things I do, and we all do, right? But when we point those out to someone and we keep holding them in that light, whatever you focus on grows. So that person becomes more annoying. So we've chosen to really look at what are the, where can we support each other to grow and keep on growing, and being curious about each other and curious about how each other are evolving. And like you said, McKenna, I've used this with my couples works for years, because it's so easy in a couple too to get into a fixed view and think you know somebody. And here's what I always say, you think this person is this way, and then they get up and they go to work and they're a completely different person when they walk in the doors, because people don't have that view of them. Right.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
it's good to just share a real example, right? So
Yeah.
like for me with you, I think early on I thought, oh, well, you're so disorganized, right? Because
Yeah.
disorganization, I'm very organized, and you are more creative, you're more spontaneous, you've got a very different approach. And that's the tricky thing about views, and why I want to share real examples here, is that it's rooted in some degree of truth, right? Compared to the way I operate, you are more disorganized. And but then in that, if I pin you into that view and go, Gigi is this way, like you said, you become more that way. It's such a fascinating thing. It's like something about the power of that observation actually makes you start to behave even more that way. So instead, over the years, what I've really done is opened up and gone, okay, well, that of course is a tendency sometimes, but like you said, it's like there's other ways in which you're extremely structured and organized and think things through very clearly. And then it's also to go,
I actually taught you how to be organized.
Exactly. The reason I am so organized is because you taught me how to do that. So even though you couldn't fully do it for yourself, you had that structure and that ability, and you do that with your clients all the time. So I think just opening up my thinking around that. And then too, if I ever see like, oh, you're struggling to keep something structured or to whatever, then I go in there and I'm like, okay, how can I support, to really help you be at your best, sort of thing. So instead of making it this fixed thing of you are this way and it's frustration, it's just like, okay, we all have our quirks, we all have our different things, and that just happens to be one that shows up for you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of one for me?
Yeah, that you're not too organized, but you
controlling.
Too fixed. Yeah, controlling. Too controlling. Yeah. Which, when you were young, I pushed up against all the time because everything was to be controlled all the time, right? And
so again, very rooted in truth for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. But when we make it a view, then it fixes people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the truth is that is your strength hugely, not the controlling part, but the part of being able to hold everything together. And like you said, organize things. And that's your brilliance with clients and everything, and your brilliance in our business. So yeah, if I feel a view about that and feel like it's wrong, and I start making you wrong, then same thing, then I can't really use that genius of yours, right? Now I think we've done so well that we're able to tap into each other's genius, because there are many times, not just disorganized, that I'm much more creative and push against the structure of things. Because,
well, that's what I was just going to say. Is it's a perfect point that usually the flip side of whatever that thing is has a gift in it. Your quote unquote disorganization is your visionary quality.
Absolutely.
Whereas I'm much more of I don't want to say in the box thinker, but I kind of operate within certain parameters. A lot of times in my mind, it's hard for me to break out of that. Whereas you are this expansive visionary thinker. And that's one of the greatest gifts to our business, our clients. So if I don't pigeonhole you there and I allow you to be that, then your genius comes through.
Yeah. So that is a view. Yeah. So the view has an element usually of truth in it, because here's how we get those views. We live with people and we do become familiar and we see that they do certain things over and over. But the issue is when we start to make it a problem, and then every time we look at them, we see them in that light, and then we think, oh, there they go again, right? And in that, then we hold them in a negative way, and then it fixes them. And like you said, McKenna, the observer creates, the results there. And when we observe people in a certain way constantly, then what happens is they become that for us. But then when they're not around us, they become somebody different because people don't have those views. They're not so personal with them. So that's one of those two, the personal and professional, and the view are, I would say that's the overlying arching way that we handle our dynamic as a mother and daughter and as being family, knowing each other for a long time, going through a lot together, evolving in so many different ways because you've worked with me since you were young, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that's made our relationship also the dynamic be able to work is that you came into it with respect for me as a mentor. And that's not going to be true for all mother and daughter relationships, but in our particular relationship, that's what really worked. And also because you were incredibly interested in learning. Learning what I knew, right? So in that part of,
absolutely. Yeah, that's been an interesting one to navigate because again, setting aside the personal or taking things personally there sometimes to allow you to really mentor me and say what you see over the years, that's been challenging. And we've gone through a lot of different stages with that, and we just did our episode on recently on healing the mother and father wound. And I talked about, navigating a lot of that while I was in relationship with you, but we kind of peeled back the layers of that onion over time to where more and more and more I could really open up and just really receive the guidance and the mentorship, but also then, of course, see you as a human being with flaws and everything else, just like we all are. So that's a little more complex, but I think just with those first 2 points you made in terms of personal and professional, and then holding a view, first of all, again, these are not just for mothers and daughters. This is like prime relationship communication skills for any relationship. It could be with your father. It could be with your siblings. It could be with, a marriage or in business. But the other thing is just to really look and see, let's say it is with your mother or your daughter, where do you take things personally? What are those things, those triggers that get you hung up? Or where do you hold a view? And could you open up and start to see, okay, there may be truth in that, but also, is there a gift in that, right? Or has this person evolved? Or maybe if you just sort of held the view more loosely, didn't fix it so much, often then that gives people room to evolve, which is really interesting. Then they might surprise you over time and how they change.
Yeah, this goes back to the podcast we did recently on healing the mother wound, right? The mother-daughter wound. And that you did so much work around that. And I did work on myself, of course, too, but so much work to let go of things and hurts and all of those things in the ways that, you were hurt during growing up and everything. And so through that, you did a lot of work. And sometimes that work has to be done before, if you are thinking about going into business together, before you do that.
Yeah.
You were able to navigate it beautifully even while we were going through it. But that I think also is because you were so curious about learning and about the evolution of coaching and working with people and all of that.
Yeah, beautifully might be a stretch. I was able to navigate it. It had a lot of ups and downs.
It's true.
We had many different aspects and stages. But yeah. Which kind of brings us to
Yeah, we can
Go
talk
ahead.
about our moments, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to the next question, which is how do we handle conflicts when they arise? Because obviously, we're not always peaceful. We were pretty peaceful, I will say that, but we do definitely have times and have had times over the years where we are at odds, or we do take something personally, or we get upset or whatever. So, what do you see there, Gigi? How do we navigate conflict?
Well, usually I yell at you and then you yell back at me.
Yeah, it's great.
But again, we do it in this way that we do it, we're engaged in it and we're fully feel it, but also we sit with it and we let it go. So even if we feel all the feelings and all the thoughts and all those things, we don't internalize it and take it personally. I think that's huge.
Definitely. I mean, I think this is a misconception, is that people think in relationships that have a lot of peace that they must not have a lot of conflict, or that they don't speak up somehow for what's true or what they want. And that's not the case at all, right? It's like we definitely have times where we are at odds, or we do have something we get upset about, or there is a conflict. And so not burying that, I think, is really important. Being willing to say what we feel or what we see. And I think we're not reactive about it most of the time. We definitely have our reactive moments, but you've definitely taught me, like, sitting with something and waiting for the right timing sometimes.
Timing's
other
important.
times not. But that's helpful. So we're not always just like in the moment reactive. But if there is something that we want to talk through or something that upset us, we will bring that to the other person. And there might be high emotions or, some upset in all of that. But like you said, I think, one thing we want to talk about with this is that we don't necessarily make it mean something or make any big decisions in the moment of upset. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's to wait to have the experience and all the feelings and all the talking and whatever, and then to go away and to sit with it. Because often, I see this in relationships and couples, there's some couples that every time there's a conflict or something, there's also this sense of this is the end, and, and this will never happen again, and all these strong feelings. And all of us feel that way at times, right? When we go through something with someone. But then the allowance of giving it time and space to wait and let that move through, because again, that's also the emotions moving through, and to not, like you said, make decisions then at all. Yeah. Wait.
A decision
Just
would
give it
be
time.
like, oh, I'm never talking to her again, or we're not going to do this business now, or whatever that might be. And you might feel that way. That's so much of what we teach our clients too, just in terms of how to feel and navigate their emotions, is like, we're going to have these feelings and these thoughts come up, and you can allow them to come up, but you don't necessarily act on them right in that moment. You allow the emotional wave to sort of crest. And then usually there comes a point where you're a little clearer and you can come to the conversation again from a little bit more of a clear place, and actually, discuss if you need to discuss, or maybe you see something there and you guys come back to it. But I think that's a big part, is like, it's not that we don't bring things to each other. It's not that we don't react or have that emotional wave, but we tend to know to go away and kind of let that settle and simmer a little bit before we make any big decisions or make that mean something.
And not go into blame. I think that's something we're really, really good at. I mean, sometimes, of course, we feel hurt and whatever, and maybe we blame when we don't talk to each other, but we, with each other, when we communicate, we really communicate from a place of, I don't know, being on each other's team, really, that we know that we're in this together and we're not going to be in it together forever. But we are there, and we, like in a lot of our other podcasts, we're all in until we're not,
Yeah. Yeah. Again, these are relationship skills. They're the same skills in a romantic relationship as they are in, in a family dynamic. And I think what's different here than maybe the typical mother-daughter relationship is we're invested at a deeper level because we do work together. We do have multiple layers and levels. So we sort of have to be all in a deeper way. We're going to talk about this in a little while, but it's like any business partnership is in some ways, you always say like a marriage, because there's just this deep level of commitment that has to be there on both sides. So a lot of this has so many parallels for both.
Yeah.
So what do you wish, Gigi, that people knew or understood about mother-daughter relationships that they don't necessarily?
I think you had a good point when we were talking about this. Yeah, you had talked about they're just meant to evolve on both sides. Yeah, you want to share a little bit about that because you talked about it?
Yeah, I think just that your relationship does not need to be the same as it was when you were a kid, like if you're a young child with a mother, that's going to be one dynamic. When you're in high school or college, that might be a different one. Like as you grow up and you're both adults, then your relationship is going to evolve over time. And I think where people get a little stuck, I know there's a point you want to make about this, Gigi, is where they sort of, again, think that the other person, think that the relationship should be what it always was, maybe in terms of a certain mother-daughter dynamic, or don't allow for those sort of ebbs and flows and changes over time.
Yeah, I think sometimes daughters want their mothers to stay like being a parent, and our kids in general, that they think of them as a parent. And again, we can talk about McKenna, we can go through the different stages because there are different decades. I have kids that, are almost 50 years old now. And there's decades you go through in different types of relationships you go through with my different daughters in different times. But I hear this sometimes with people like wanting their mother to be like this parent, this expectation, and they're already grown women. And that's really difficult. You have to think for a parent too, because we raise our kids, and at a certain point we're done raising our kids, and then we're people who want to evolve. We want to maybe be wild and crazy or whatever, because we've raised our kids, we've done our work. And I think sometimes there's this view again of holding a mother into a position of like, oh, she should be this, and this, instead of allowing her to evolve and become who she's supposed to be, right? So it's the next evolution. And I think moms do that for daughters too. They hold them in this certain light of they are this certain way, or they're their daughter. I find myself doing this. They're a little girl, and I find myself doing this, correcting my kids that are 35 years old, and they're like, back off, lady. And when I do it, I realize, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing? It's just unconscious. It's habitual. It's a habit, or not allowing them to stand in their power of, now they have their values, the way they see the world, they have their marriages, their families, and they're not going to run them the way I think they should run them, or the way, thank God, the way I did. So they're becoming they're becoming more evolved. And that's the way we want our children to grow, is we want them to evolve so far beyond who we are and what we did and how we handled things. I wish that for my kids every single day, even though sometimes I'm human and I still try to put them in the hole of being, or in the hole, in the box. Position of being who I think they should be or what they should do. So I think there's a lot around that with mothers and daughters. So much. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, is there somewhere where you think, oh, my mom's not being a good mother there, or she should do this, or she should do that, or she needs to make up for these things in childhood. And again, we're not going to go deeply into that in this episode. We can link that Healing the Mother and Father Wound episode in the show notes if you have a curiosity about that, because yeah, I think what you're saying, Gigi, is just that there comes a point at which, in our opinions, that it's like it's so much more beneficial to relate to each other as human beings, not as like mother and daughter. And you can still have, it's like, what are the things you love about being a mother and daughter? If there are facets of that that you both really love, you can keep those. Of course, you can have that kind of fun mother-daughter relationship. But then there's probably a lot of aspects of that that come with ideas about what each person should or shouldn't be or do or say or whatever. And it's like, could you just set all that aside and sort of reinvent your relationship, allow the other person to grow, get to know them as a person, maybe a friend, and not just as quote unquote, your mother or your daughter. I think that's the main thing here. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that as a mother, I think what mothers, and I'm speaking for myself, and this might not be true for other people that are listening, but I think you really want to become a friend with your daughter as you get older, and as they get older. Great. It's like you have your kids and you spend all these years with them and you think, wow, these are really cool people, and I want to be friends with them. I had one of my friends say that if I, if I met my daughter somewhere, I would think, wow, I want to be her friend, Mm-hmm. So I think that's really important to go ahead. If you can evolve to that point, that's a super fun way to grow your relationship with your daughters. Our daughter.
Yeah, and I think there will be mothers that cling to being a mother, in their mm-hmm. what they believe that means, because probably they want to feel needed is a big mm-hmm. thing, or feel like they're a part of your life. So, if you are interested in evolving your relationship with your mother, and she is the type of mother that does sort of have certain things like that, then I think the main thing there is to make sure that she knows that she is still needed, and what are the ways in which you need her in your life, or you want her in your life, or you want to be in relationship with her and connected with her. And then you may find she can let go a little bit more of some of the, needing to act like a mother, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And the other thing with this is that there are different ages and stages. We touched on this a little bit, but at different times in your life, I'm going to speak from the daughter's point of view in this case, then you'll have, again, different relationships with your mom. So like when I went off to college, that was really a time where I was not so connected. Of course, we still talked and everything, but I really needed to individuate at that time. Gigi and I were very, very connected when I was young. Almost too much so at times. I was a little codependent.
A lot of responsibility.
Yeah. And so mm-hmm. I remember really feeling like I have to figure out who I am on my mm-hmm. own. Right. And so Gigi, you often talk about that kids have to go away sometimes and not be as connected. And that's something I think you did really well, that I see other parents struggle with, is like, they feel like, oh, if their child is sort of, they think, pulling away or something like that, then they freak out and they want to sort of cling tighter. Is there anything you want to share about that? Just that there are, you've had 5 kids spanning multiple decades, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you've had different times with each of us where we've been closer or not so close.
Yeah. And I think that's just kids. Yeah. But the other point you are talking about, I find this too, it's so important to allow your children to go, and to stay connected with them. In the time when you're talking about when you went to school, we weren't so connected at all. You would come home and then we'd be connected. But I did really, I saw that you had way too much responsibility and you needed to go and create and find your own life. Yeah. And then if you came back and you did. And that's what I find is most of the time, when you don't resist that your children are going to go out and they're going to create their life, they're going out there to become who they're need to be or meant to be. And if you try to hold them close, then they resist and they want to go further and further away. It's just like anybody.
Yeah.
And this can be difficult because it can feel like you're losing them. But trust in, if you stay connected, you're not upset with them, you're loving, most of the time kids will always come back around, and they may not live close to you, but they come back around in terms of you have a strong relationship. And there are different decades where kids are closer or further away, I think. Absolutely. It depends on what's happening in their lives. It depends on how involved you are in there once they start having kids. So there's a lot of complexity to that. So it's different for everyone. I don't think there's a set way there.
I think the main thing is just not clinging too tightly, not because kids feel that and then they want to pull away even more to individuate or to have their space or whatever it might be. If you're an open door and you're loving and you still, reach out sometimes and so on, but you also give them that space at certain times in their life, then they are more likely to come back and to want to be more connected. So
I would say that's probably in their 20s because, the other thing is kids that are in their teens, it's really important for you to be connected to them. Yeah. So they're, again, we're talking about decades.
Pushing you away.
If they're pushing, you don't have to, you don't need to be trying, again, if you try to control them too much, they'll go out and do all kinds of things, and they may do that anyways, but you do want to be involved with them. That's why I always tell parents to make sure you're talking with your kids before they go into puberty and those kind of things, to keep that connection.
Yeah, it's a really important point that we're talking really about the 20s kind of and beyond.
20s, 30s, 40s. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So another question we wanted to cover is just what do we want to model for other mothers and daughters or women in general? What are some things that are, we think, important or that we'd love to see more of in the world? So one, which we've touched on a fair bit, is allowing each other to grow, not holding each other in a certain light. And this is really with families in general, because Gigi, you were talking about this, that when families get together, a lot of times they feel like they have to be this certain person or this certain version of them comes out. And that, I think that comes back to the views, right?
Mm. Yeah. That we say, oh, she's always like this. And maybe that person's been out and really working on themselves and they've grown and they've really changed, but you come back into your family dynamic and then everybody sees you that way. And how are you going to push up against the people who've known you most of your life? And there'll be no way for you to show that. And that's something I really see that is an issue with families, is not allowing and being curious about where is that person now in their life. We all evolve and change. I've changed so much through my lifetime. Of course, there's certain things that have stayed the same. But if you're a person that's growing and evolving, then you're learning more and more and more about this human experience, and you make lots of mistakes, but then through your mistakes, you see how to grow and be different and be a better person. And if we hold each other, even with the mistakes, it just is such a terrible thing to do to another human being. Yeah. And it's easy to do. It's easy to be unconscious about it. So that's one thing I would love to share with, mothers and daughters and just people in general, is be curious and be open to your daughters growing and growing completely different than you are, completely different. And be acknowledging of that and be curious about that and be, supportive of it as well.
Yeah. I guess it's just like so much of this is unconscious, right?
It is unconscious, yeah.
If you get with family and you tend to make jokes about something that person always did, or like, you and one child talk about the other person. And again, you're not doing it consciously, but it does create this certain dynamic. And I think we've all had the experience of being with family at some point and thinking and feeling frustrated because we're like, I'm so different, or this thing has changed and they can't even see it, and I feel like I become this old version of myself when I'm around them. And that's why this happens. And so it really takes consciously thinking about it when you do get together with family or when you do talk to other family members, to not just go into those habitual patterns of storytelling or, in some ways it's like gossip, right? We don't think of it as gossip, but anytime you're talking about someone that's not there and it's not in a super empowering light, right? Or like
Yeah.
a way that really lifts them up, that's how you basically taught us, Gigi, to
Yeah.
understand gossip, right?
Yeah. 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 And gossip's another one. I hold moms responsible for this, I have to say, in terms of how you treat other women and how you are in terms of group dynamics and talking about women and talking bad about women in front of your daughters. Is then you see this in schools. You see this like excluding, and you see this, like we're the cool kids or whatever. And I talk to women about that are mothers, and say it's up to us to change that. And I think with my daughters, I have been very, and of course, we're not 100% by any means, but very much so that we treat each other well. And with other women, we're empowering to other women, even if they're so completely different than us, have completely different lives. And the thing for me and in our family, I think hugely is respect. And I just think that as a quality of respect, and that people who are different, that we respect them just as much as the people that we think are really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And not just about women, by the way, too, but I think
Right.
the way women talk about men too, which is a whole
That's
other
a whole nother podcast.
yeah, that we want to do at some point, but is again, just being conscious of the way we talk about other people, or when we're talking about other people, and then, like you're saying, what you're modeling for your daughters there, because that's huge. They're going to get certain things modeled to them, of course, in their peer groups and school and the media and things like that as well. But you do, if they're young and they're at home, you do have the power to some degree to be having conscious conversations with them about these kinds of things. And I think that's what you're talking about, Gigi. And even once they get older, potentially, but just kind of questioning, like, hey, is this the way we want to do this? Or even being vulnerable about, like, hey, I messed up there and I was talking about this person and it wasn't the most empowering thing. And I really want to own that. That just models something for your daughters that can have a really, really big ripple effect, I think.
Yeah. And you can still be playful, have fun. When we get together, my kids make fun of me. And I'm really good at laughing at myself. A lot of people
are very good at that.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't good at that, so they take it really personally. From me, I get it. I see all my things, and I know myself pretty well in terms of all my good and bad. And I'll call McKenna sometimes, and I'll say, I just feel mean. So I know that side of myself, right? And I'm aware.
Said that last week.
Yeah, I did. I said, I just feel like mean. I wouldn't be mean. Yeah. But because I have that relationship with myself, that I honor those things that come up like that. Then I don't try to put them down and, in the shadows. Then I can have this dance with it and see what's going on there. And so I think that's just, it's so important to bring the subconscious or the unconscious to conscious conversations. I do that. I try to do that with my granddaughter, who is 9, and she has all these dynamics, a very outgoing human being, and to tell her in certain things, like, how would you feel if somebody treated you like that? What would you feel? And conscious, and then she sits back and thinks, oh, that wouldn't feel so great, Yeah.
I think the last point to just touch on, we've talked about this a little bit already, is just that if you are interested in working in some way with your mother or your daughter, because we hear that a lot from people, like, oh, I'd love to at some point hire my mom or hire my daughter, or I'd love to do a business or a project with them. It's just to realize that, like we've said, it is kind of like a marriage in the sense of a business partnership or doing something, a big project together. It's not something that's just going to work on its own necessarily. Like, hopefully, even if you have a great relationship, it's going to take work. You are going to have to work on communication. You are going to have triggers come up. You are going to have these patterns that show up. And it's just to understand that that's not enough of a reason necessarily to go, oh, we can't work together, or, this is not something we should do. If you really have an interest or a curiosity, any business partnership is like that, just like any relationship or marriage is it does take conscious effort and work to make it work over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so important. We've touched on this is to bring your best self, your higher self to it, and take the high road, because you know how we can be unconscious. This is always something I see you have to be careful of in a family business, is kind of, again, being that casual, familiar, and just showing sometimes really the worst part of yourself, being like you would in a kind of family dynamic. And that's where, again, the professional and the taking the high road and coming and walking through that door, being pro, and then making sure your other family member does the same is so important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to work at that. That takes time.
It does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it can get easier and easier over time. I think our relationship has gotten much more peaceful, and we have fewer breakdowns and fewer things that trigger each other. And that's what you want, it's that evolution.
And one other thing, is looking to see where your strengths in business and your roles in business, and seeing who is good at what makes a huge difference. And, staying in your lane. And if you need support, asking for support, because that is powerful. Because I see sometimes people go into business together and they go in with a certain strength and they start doing all the things they're not good at. And then they get frustrated, and then the other person's doing things they don't really want to do. So it's important to define those things. And of course, in the early stages of business, you have to do everything, but you still see where do we have our strengths that we can be in those strengths most of the time.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we covered a lot today. And
this is a big one.
Yeah. Hopefully there's something you can take away here, no matter what your relationship is with your mother or your daughter. And again, even for other relationships in your life, for your marriage, your business partnership, whatever that might be. So thank you, Gigi, and we'll see you in the next episode.
That's our episode for today, but let's not make it the end of our love story. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and think of some women in your life you'd love to share it with. And if you want to learn more about our events and programs, visit wayofthemuse.com. See you next time.